Hello everyone, Mr. Owner's here, but you can call me Luke. 2013 wasn't that bad of a year for movies, at least as far as I could tell. I mean, sure, you had its low points like the always crap-filled January, or the summer season that really could have been better, but otherwise it wasn't too bad of a year. But today, I want to talk about the best and worst movies that I saw all last year. Now, I'm not arranging these in like a top 10 sort of fashion. I'm instead putting these all in alphabetical order. So with that said, let's get the bad movies out of the way first, so I can end this on a positive note with the good movies.
A Good Day to Die Hard. Now, considering this is the only Die Hard movie I've ever seen, I can't really condemn it as much as most people have. Oh, but don't take that to mean that I think this movie is good, though, because it's still pretty bad. With badly shot and edited action scenes, terrible one-liners, and heroes who are pretty much invincible, which moves all attention, this is a really bad entry into the action genre. For 2013 action movies, you might want to stick with White House Down, which is much better than this. Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. This is possibly the stupidest movie I saw all year, and this is another one of those gritty reboot of a fairy tale films that has started to come out every year, starting with 2012. And of all the ones that I've seen, this is by far the worst. And considering how ludicrous the premise is, well, with the fact that Hansel and Gretel use shotguns, miniguns, and freaking grenades, it confuses me that they played the whole thing completely straight. And that just takes all the fun out of it. If they had done this whole thing tongue-in-cheek, it still wouldn't have been very good, but, it would have been a guilty pleasure. But with what they did, it just ruins the whole thing. Identity Thief. In her first leading film role, Melissa McCarthy is finally given a chance to show what she's capable of, but even she couldn't make this movie funny. And rather than doing something clever or witty with its premise, it instead opts for being as raunchy as possible without overdoing it. But thankfully, the third act keeps this movie from being too terrible, even if said third act is a bit overly sentimental. Now You See Me. This just barely avoided staying off my worst of list, and that's only because the movie itself is actually quite enjoyable for the most part, thanks in large part to the performances by the four magicians and the various magic tricks on screen. If it weren't for the plot twist at the end involving Mark Ruffalo's character, Now You See Me would have been a pretty decent movie.
Okay, now that all of the honorable mentions are out of the way, let's jump right into the worst of the worst. And trust me, these three movies are truly awful. We begin with
After Earth. From the once great mind of M. Night Shyamalan comes After Earth, in which Jaden Smith runs around Earth in the future being an idiot and a bad actor, while Will Smith is stuck on a crashed ship being an equally bad actor. When the whole movie revolves around fearlessness, you just know how the whole thing will play out, and it plays out exactly as you predict. It's no wonder M. Night's name never shows up in the trailers, because if it did, we would have gotten some warning to just how terrible this was, and then no one would have seen it, which is what should have happened anyway. Frozen. Of all the films I saw this year, this was by far the most disappointing one of them all, and it's only because Disney put zero effort into it, aside from the animation. Completely awful songs that either serve no purpose or don't convey anything, boring personality-free characters, aside from Elsa, and comedy that mostly falls flat on its face, and one of the stupidest villains in recent memory make this one of Disney's weakest films of the past few years. Hopefully, they bring something good to the table for 2014. The Host. What's that? A movie that's based off of a Stephanie Meyer novel ended up being terrible? Oh, what a shock. Still, this movie had a small chance of being decent, with Andrew Niccol at the helm, who's responsible for the excellent The Truman Show. But unfortunately, sometimes you just can't make something good out of something bad. In a word, this movie is boring. A boring story with unbelievably boring characters, played by actors who sound equally as bored. This film was a disaster from start to finish. Avoid it at all costs.
Right, now that all of that crap is out of the way, let's get right to the good stuff. Thank God. But first, a few honorable mentions for the movies that didn't quite make the best of list, but were still very good in their own right. Starting with
42. Definitely one of the more compelling sports movies I've seen. This account of Jackie Robinson's baseball career is well acted and well written. True, the plot is a bit formulaic, but there are a lot of little details sprinkled throughout the movie that add a lot to the story. Like when Jackie's teammates begin copying him by leading off the bases, much like him. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it, even if you aren't that much of a baseball fan. Captain Phillips. Fun fact, when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I thought it wasn't going to be very interesting. But I was proven wrong by this tense, on-the-seas thriller that was led by great Tom Hanks and even better Barkhad Abdi, whose performance is even more impressive when you consider that this was his first movie, he had no acting experience, and was originally just some chauffeur. Unfortunately, I feel that the film is a bit muddled and could have been defended with a bit more focus and a lot less repetition. Despite this is a very good movie, and it is worth reviewing or two. Dallas Buyers Club. Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto are in fine form in this real-life AIDS drama about Ron Woodruff's fight with the FDA to get them to approve AIDS medication. This is a very good movie, but I feel that it wasn't as compelling as it should have been. But don't let that stop you from seeing the film, though. The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. Based on the book of the same name, this film is much improved over the overall blandness of the first Hunger Games movie. If you've seen part 2 of my Ace Attorney Investigations Let's Play, you already know how I feel about Catching Fire, but if not, here's the gist. The acting is much better, the characters are more developed, the story is more interesting, the social commentary is better presented, and the action scenes are thankfully not filmed in spazzo vision. If they had handled the characters of the other tributes better, it would have been a great movie. Despite this, I eagerly await Mockingjay Parts 1 and 2. The Lone Ranger. In my opinion, this is easily the most overhated film of the year. Sure, it didn't need to be 2.5 hours long, but the movie was so well paced that it felt much shorter than that. Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp have good comedic chemistry, and the action scenes are very well done. If you hate this movie, fine, but as for me, The Lone Ranger was nowhere near as awful as people have made it out to be. Pacific Rim. For me, Pacific Rim is this year's equivalent to The Avengers. It's a big-budget, dumb action movie, but it's so much fun to watch that the dumbness doesn't even matter one bit. And it's as awesome as a robots vs. aliens movie should be. And you know, the fact that this movie didn't make a lot of money is baffling. And if you didn't see this movie, then you should be ashamed of yourself. So rectify that now by renting the movie, Warm Bodies. The first movie I saw this year ended up being a very good one. This was a clever mix of romantic comedy writing and zombie movie writing, and together they made something unique and fresh. The acting is solid, and R is one of the year's better written characters. I only wish the story was better and the story a bit more compelling. Even so, I think you should check out this movie. The Wolf of Wall Street. Martin Scorsese's latest film is a somewhat entertaining one, and Leonardo DiCaprio is delightfully energetic as Jordan Belfort. And don't let the 3-hour runtime scare you off, because much like The Lone Ranger, the pacing keeps it from feeling that long. However, the movie as a whole is nowhere near as funny as people make it out to be, and it even came close to not even being an honorable mention. And that's because it's too big and overblown for its own good, resulting in the movie is not containing much substance, which is especially clear in this entire second act, which is pretty disposable. That, and I think it way overdoes the raunchy humor, and it's sometimes crude just for the sake of it. Even so, I think this movie is worth a watch, but maybe wait for it to come out on DVD first.
Okay, all the good movies are out of the way. Now let's get right to the great movies. Starting with What Else But
12 Years a Slave. This was obviously going to get on this list, and how could it not? The performances are fantastic, especially Chiwetel Ejiofor, who turns in a powerful performance as Solomon Northup, a man who was kidnapped and separated from his family and sold into slavery. The film also pulls no punches in its portrayal of slave treatment, particularly in 2 very uncomfortable scenes of torture, one with Northup and another with Patsy, who was fantastically played by Lupita Nyong'o in her first movie. I highly recommend that you see this movie, but prepare yourself for those 2 scenes. American Hustle. American Hustle is actually very similar to Wolf of Wall Street, only a lot better. The performances are spot on, and the chemistry between the actors is near perfect. And the plot involving Carmine trying to take down Mayor Carmine Polito, who is played by Jeremy Renner in a very underrated performance, is an intriguing one and is fun to watch. To be honest, it isn't much more than that, but it was enough to get this movie on the list. The Conjuring. As far as I can tell, most of the horror movies that came out in 2013 were either okay or completely terrible. Granted, I'm basing this only on how the critics reacted to them since I only saw 2 horror movies this year, and The Conjuring was one of them. Here's a fun fact, when I saw the based on true events tagline, I almost didn't see this movie, since most horror movies with that tagline ended up being pretty bad. But luckily, The Conjuring managed to be one of the best horror films in the while. And the reason for that is because it accomplished what most other horror movies nowadays seem to fail at, being scary. And it does this with some great creepy atmosphere, great acting, and skillfully blends elements of the medieval horror, The Exorcist, and even a bit of Ghost Hunters. If you need to be properly scared, give The Conjuring a watch. Gravity. Easily the best looking film of the whole year. It may not have much of a plot, but it more than makes up for that with an excellent score, beautiful visuals, pulse-pounding thrills, and fantastic performance from Sandra Bullock. Alfonso Cuarón also lends his directing talents and manages to immerse the audience with scenes done in one take, and he uses the 3D to its fullest effect for even further immersion. If you haven't seen this movie, then watch it on the biggest screen you can find and with 3D, or it won't be worth it. Her. Without doubt, the best movie of the year, and my favorite movie of the year as well. This film about a writer who falls in love with his operating system is superbly acted, emotionally touching, intellectually stimulating, and full of charm. The story works on a multitude of levels. For example, the humor is well done, but that humor serves a double purpose for developing the characters and to make Samantha, the OS, seem as human to the audience as she is to Theodore, and Spike Jonze pulls this off perfectly. I urge you to see this movie if you haven't already. Iron Man 3. Easily the best of the 3 Iron Man movies, and probably the best Avengers-related Marvel movie so far. Iron Man 3 is very witty and tells a surprisingly good story involving Tony Stark overcoming his anxiety issues and losing the use of his suit. The film also has some of the most creative action scenes in a while, with Tony using various pieces of the suit in different ways. That and the Mandarin provides the Iron Man movies with their first real villain, and whose reveal is a very clever twist. This is my favorite action movie of the year, and if you somehow missed out on this movie, go rent it right now. Mud. Between the 2 McConaughey movies that came out in 2013, this was the superior movie. His performance is fantastic and feels genuine, and that goes double for both child actors, and it confuses me that they were snubbed at every single awards show. It also helps that this is one of the absolute best coming-of-age stories I've ever seen, and it's compelling all throughout. And it kind of makes me ashamed of people, because this movie didn't do too very well. And if you were one of the people who skipped out on Mud, then you should correct that right now. Philomena. This movie kind of fell under the radar for most people, and that's too bad, because this is a fascinating true story about one woman whose son was taken from her while she was living in a convent, and her search for him. Philomena's search for her son is a compelling one, with her learning something new with each place she goes to. That and the religious aspect of the story is handled with a careful attention to detail, and that goes a long way for me. This was a great movie, and I wish more people saw it. Prisoners. This was a haunting examination on the lengths that people will go to save those they hold dear. Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman give the best performances of their respective careers, especially with Jackman showing powerful determination in finding his daughter. I really don't know what else to say about this movie. You should just see it for yourself. Rush. Another two-story movie on the list, but this one involves the famous Formula One rivalry between Niki Lauda and James Hunt. And I may not care about Formula One that much, but that didn't stop this movie from being fantastic. And Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl are fantastic at portraying these two people who are at once at each other's nets, but also had genuine respect for one another, and who also weren't that great in their personal lives. The racing scenes are some of the most adrenaline-pumping scenes all year, and Ron Howard's stretching puts you right in the driver's seat. If you love racing movies, this is a must-see for you. The World's End. Easily the funniest and most entertaining film of the whole year, this latest collaboration between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost is just so much fun to watch. The changes in chemistry between each of the actors are so perfect that you're guaranteed to laugh. The fight scenes are also the best fight scenes of the year. Heck, they're the only good fight scenes that 2013 produced. The fight choreography is exciting, and the sound design for these fights really brings out the intensity of each punch and blow delivered. I'm really not sure what else to say about The World's End, other than the fact that it was fun from the first frame to the last frame. If you are a fan of Simon Pegg, or any of the people he works with, you owe it to yourself to see this.
And there you have it, the best and worst movies of 2013, in my own opinion, of course. I kind of wish I had seen more movies in 2013, and I didn't get to, unfortunately. But hey, I still saw some great movies, And you know what? That's what matters the most. Right? Right. So, here's 2013, and let's hope that 2014 produces even better movies. I'll see you guys some other time. Mishonos out. Take care.